Sport24 editor Garen Lamley and chief writer Rob Howing are with us in studio this morning to give us a recap of the weekend's big sporting results and some of the talking points. Gents, good to have you back in the studio. Thanks for coming in. Super Rugby, we always like to kick off with that. Rob, I'm going to start with you. And from a South African perspective, I think let's start with the most heartbreaking result, which was without a doubt the Cheetahs Highlanders, after a commanding lead to then implode within the last sort of 5 to 8 minutes to lose. What did you take from that game?
Yeah, I mean, I think most South Africans would have been down on their knees after that game. We all know that the Cheetahs, if you're not a Cheetahs fan originally, that the Cheetahs tend to be most South Africans' sort of second side. And boy, what heartbreak. I mean, they really played well, actually, for 76 minutes of that match. Believe it or not, they were 41-24 up in the 76th minute. I had to sort of go and do a double check on that because I thought maybe I was dreaming, but I wasn't. And believe it or not, they somehow contrived to let the Highlanders score 3 tries in those last 4 and a bit minutes, including obviously after the siren. But still, an incredible way to fritter it away. And it just said so much about how South African teams just have completely lost their mojo against New Zealand opposition, unfortunately. It was there for the taking. The Cheetahs had done the hard yards. That's at least something. At least you realise that for 70 odd minutes, it is a South African team is capable of going toe to toe with the New Zealand side. But I don't know if it's mental or fitness related, but whatever it is, the Cheetahs have a massive problem. They are now the numero uno in sort of sporting chokers in the South African landscape. Maybe not a bad thing from a Proteas point of view. I think our cricketers will take a little bit of a backseat from that mantle for a bit. But the Cheetahs really, I mean, that dressing room must have been a really aching place afterwards because they were just so naive. When you're 41-24 up, the thing you've got to do is make sure that you actually close out the game properly. Do clever things like, don't kick off deep to the Highlanders to allow them to run back, because we know that New Zealand teams can score from just about anywhere, at a whim. And that's pretty much what happened. So, real heartbreak in that match. But, of course, we had some other gory results against New Zealand teams this weekend as well.
Well, let's unpack that, Garen. Of course, the Stormers. I don't know how many tries they've conceded in the last 3 games. I mean, I don't know if you guys have done some calculations there, but I'm sure it's not a pretty sight. The Bulls, again, I mean, probably one of their worst seasons to date. And the Kings, of course, had a bye. They've been surprisingly good. So it's really, again, down to the Lions and Sharks. Sharks not that convincing, but, I think it's 7 out of 9, 7 out of 10. Yeah. Tell us about the rest of the results.
I mean, starting with the Storm, as you mentioned first, I believe it's 24 tries they've conceded in those 3 matches on their New Zealand tour. It works out to be exactly 8 a match, which obviously isn't ideal at all from a South African point of view. A strange match against the Hurricanes. When you look at on paper, you thought that would have been the toughest match of their tour. Hurricanes are the bookies' favourites, are the defending champions. But for large parts of that match, the Stormers were actually in contention. When you look at the final scoreline, you see they conceded 7 tries and only scored 1. That's 6 tries more, potentially 42 points when you kick the conversions. So the fact that they only lost by, 19, I think, in the end, it was a very strange match. New Zealand teams never seem to kick any penalties. They always kick for the line out, set up the try. The South African teams are happy to take the points. So the fact that they should have been 42 down and only lost by 19, I think that's sort of a reflection there. So they'll take some heart from the fact that they were better, but they were coming off such a low base in their previous 2 defeats that they were always going to be better. They sent a whole lot of players home. A couple of players I think were playing with injury as well. They lost fly for Robert de Pre fairly early as well, so they're totally disjointed. The Hurricanes, for their part, I think they always knew they had that match in the bag at some point. It went a little bit awry for them in the second half, but they finished strongly and they scored some amazing tries as well. And there were a couple of tries as well that were only ruled out by the TMO as well. So it's it's a tour, annus horribilis tour and year for South Africans, Stormers in particular, overseas. They're back now. They've got a bias. I think they'll be better, hopefully, once they've regrouped. As you said, the other South African teams, the Bulls, record defeat at Loftus against the Crusaders team that hadn't won there since 2008. I'm sure Coach Nollis Maria, his job must be on the line now. I wouldn't be surprised if they just waited until the end of the season to perhaps get rid of him. Nothing seems to be happening there. Former Bulls, Pretoria legends, Victor Matfield, Nasbuer calling for his head, wondering what's actually going on there, what's in place, structure, no game plan. It's very, very sad what's happened to the only South African team that's actually won Super Rugby before. The Crusaders, they are a formidable team. They're the only undefeated team in the tournament. They played like potential champions. They've won it 7 times, haven't won it for a while. They've got to be right up there now with the favourites for the title. They played some fantastic rugby. It's easier to take your foot off the pedal when you are so far ahead. There's nothing to play for. You're not going to concede a bonus point. You've got the 3 tries more than the opposition already to go on and score 10 tries. You really got to doff your cap to them. They really, really played well, and they're now heading back for a massive match against the Hurricanes. And then the other South African teams, the Sharks are sort of bumbling along. I'm not convinced by their play. They played better last week in Argentina against the Jaguars, but I believe the Jaguars are on the shadow of the side that they were even last year, and they weren't that great last year. They struggled to beat the Sunwolves this time. The Sharks do seem to play better away from Durban, which, they're going to make the Super Rugby playoffs, and they're going to have an away quarterfinal. So that maybe bodes well for them, because they're not that great for whatever reason at Kings Park. And then the Kings by, as you said, and the Lions in Melbourne against the Rebels. Really, Rebels perhaps the worst team in Super Rugby this year. Predictably, the Lions got the victory, picked up the bonus point there. But again, I think the scoreline flattered them a little bit. They weren't as clinical as they've been. I worry slightly about the Lions. Maybe I'm not sure if Rob agrees. Last year, I feel that they were a lot better than they are this year. They've got some key injuries. They're playing with the knowledge that Johan Ackerman's leaving at the end of the season. We heard today that Faf de Klerk is leaving as well. So they're personnel-wise, they're a little bit iffy, not as good as last year. And then last year, when they got all the way to the final, they did lose at home to both the Crusaders and the Hurricanes fairly comprehensively. And everyone's talking about if they top the log, they get a home final. But they're going to have to win that quarterfinal and semi-final to make the home final count for anything. And I'm just a bit worried that if they do meet a Crusaders or Hurricanes team, bearing in mind that one of them has to play away at some point, they can't both host a quarterfinal, that they could well come unstuck. And I think they're going to run into the same problem that the Stormers had last year when they looked fantastic, played the New Zealand teams for the very first time, and then came unstuck in the quarterfinal. But that's still 5-6 weeks away. So we'll have to see how that goes. But from a South African point of view, the Lions do seem to be the only success story.